Hello and welcome, aspiring mystics, to another installment in the reviewed and ranked series for the cast of Marvel's Ultimate Alliance 3. You already know who we are reviewing and ranking in today's video. It is the one, the only Sorcerer Supreme, and my favorite character in the entire Marvel cast. Today we will be looking at how Doctor Strange works, and we will be dissecting just how much he actually brings to the table and what is useful for him in the context of building a team and in actual combat. But as we jump into this analysis, make sure you check to see if you are subscribed to the channel. If you are not, please take a moment and remedy that, as it is greatly appreciated, and we very well might hit 400 subscribers before the end of the year, which would be absolutely amazing. Also, if you find today's video helpful and or enjoyable, make sure you hit that like button. So, what do we need to discuss when it comes to Doctor Strange? Well, first and foremost, we need to talk about his synergies from a team building standpoint, and Doctor Strange has 5 of them. He has 2 in the defensive category with both the New Avengers and the Defenders. He has 1 in the Mastery category under the Midnight Suns. He has 1 in the Resilience category for Big Brains, and finally 1 in the Energy category for Team Leaders. And Doctor Strange, he has some of the most interesting mechanics of any of the characters that we've looked at so far. So let's go ahead and jump into his base attacks before looking at those abilities. His standard round of hits in his combo is a 3-hit sequence. You will notice that on that 3rd hit, he does push himself back a little bit, providing himself some additional room. But it's not overly necessary, as these hits off of his basic attacks do stun some of the lower and smaller enemies and push them back to give him a little bit of a buffer zone. It does help that he creates a little bit of space against some of the larger mighty enemies that can be harder to stagger, but it's not ultimately something that makes or breaks the character. His heavy attack is an orb of energy that will detonate upon impact with opponents, but it does have a finite range if it does not end up connecting with someone. It's not like some of the other projectiles that we've seen that seem to go on indefinitely, but they do eventually dissipate before tiring out. For traversal, Doctor Strange does of course possess a flight mechanic granted to him by the Cloak of Levitation, and something very important to note with any character that can fly is this will consume your energy points gradually as this passive ability is being used. So keep that in mind and do not overuse it. However, flight can be fairly helpful for getting up some of the rugged terrain that is located especially here within the Dark Dimension. Doctor Strange has a very interesting and, in my opinion, confusing falling aerial. It basically has 3 energy projectiles, or I guess technically they're ethereal projectiles, that are spun out in a line out in front of his character. They collide with enemies and will deal a degree of knockback as he falls, but they kind of have a buzzsaw type appearance to them, making them among some of the most unique projectiles that is found within the entire cast. But unfortunately, as we've discussed with a couple of other characters, there's not really a great opportunity to use this attack, especially where Doctor Strange does not possess an ability that launches him up into the air. So you would have to deliberately use this falling aerial attack, and at that, it's kind of highly directional as to just how beneficial it is. If you can learn some mastery on it, you can get some decent damage out of it, but highly circumstantial and not a significant amount of reward payout. Definitely makes things a little bit unfortunate. The last item we need to look at before looking into his abilities is his block and dodge animation. This involves Doctor Strange conjuring up a light barrier in front of him for the standard block and dashing forward in a a straight line in the area of directional influence when rolling away from attacks, though it can be a little bit laggy to carry out if Doctor Strange has started to conjure that light barrier. So keep that in mind if you're needing to perform many tight dodges back to back. With everything being looked at in the standard attack realm of things, we can now move over to the abilities, the first of which being the Flames of the Faltine. With this ability, Doctor Strange casts a funnel of flames in the direction that he is facing, and as you can see, you can influence the overall direction of where this pans around to as it is being carried out. It is one of his better damage dealing abilities, with having an A-class damage rating and being fairly conservative on the EP consumption with a C classification. This is not the best attack, however, to use when trying to stagger out mighty enemies or boss characters, so do keep that in mind when you look to use this ability either on its own or in a synergy format. The attack is of the ethereal type, which is a very interesting subsection of the attack types. Not a lot of characters have access to ethereal damage. This damage type, it falls into the mastery section of all of the areas of damage type and attack types that exist within the game. So you can tend to get a little bit more benefit out of using Doctor Strange and the other few ethereal wielding characters by equipping him with some portions of the orange ISO 8, which corresponds to that mastery trait. The synergy, however, is of the burn category, which makes sense given that it is a roughly fire-based attack despite it not being an energy attack in nature. As you rank up this ability, you will have a reduced energy point cost, an increase in attack damage, the addition of the fire element to ally attacks, and finally a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted when carrying out this ability. The second ability in Doctor Strange's kit is the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. And this one is a very unique ability in its own right. It is not one that can be synergized, but instead has a bind ability attribute where the magic attack will bind multiple different enemies. And here you can see a rather less than flattering execution of those bands as they soar out in front of the character. But when it's used in combat, they will hone around and be a little bit more lively as they seek to track on to nearby enemies. And this can bind on to the small little grunt types or the mighty enemies as well. On occasion, I have seen the attack land on the mini-boss characters, though it's not something overly reliable. It does deal a minimal, and I mean a bare minimal amount of damage upon latching on to one of your opponents, but the biggest benefit of this attack is the fact that it leaves the opponents wide open for an array of other attacks and synergies from the members of your party. It's decently safe to use in terms of its energy point consumption, and as you rank up the attack, it will have a reduced energy point cost, have 2 elevations to its binding ability, which is interesting because we haven't seen an ability as of yet that has 2 progressions within the same area, one back to back, one after the other. So that is certainly a unique item when it comes to this ability. And finally, there will be a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted upon startup as it is leveled up to its final area. The third ability that Doctor Strange possesses is an incredibly unique ability in the form of the Winds of Watum. And this is one of the few abilities within the entire cast that allows a character to heal their allies. This will release that vortex in the direction that the character is facing, and it heals allies in its path. At its most potent, there are 5 different ticks that this ability will release onto your teammates, and assuming each teammate is hit with every single tick of that healing wind, they will recover a grand total of 15% of their health, or about 3% per each tick that the ability is being used. It does not deal damage, it cannot deal any stagger to your opponents as it does nothing to the opposing team. It does not have an attack type, cannot be synergized, and is relatively harmful in terms of the energy point used. It's very, very bad on how much energy points are used, but in a pinch, it can certainly be used for healing up your team and making them last just a little bit longer. As you level up this ability, it will have a reduced energy point consumption, increase in its overall effectiveness, have an increase in the area of effect of the ability, and finally have a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted. The fourth and final ability of Doctor Strange is the Bolts of Baltac. And this one is probably Doctor Strange's best overall use, not for outright damage, but certainly for the area of coverage that it has and for dealing a bit more reliable damage to stagger gauges and other large groups of enemies, kind of a get-off-me tool, if you will. This involves an astral projection, or a spirit version of Doctor Strange that appears back behind him. He actually does a little 180-degree turn before initiating this ability, and then will spin in an additional 180 degrees with that spirit projection and send beams from both characters as it spins around. This too has the ethereal attack type, the beam synergy trait, and sees across the board in terms of damage, energy point consumption, and stagger damage as well. As this ability is leveled up, you will notice that it has a reduced energy point cost, gains increased attack damage and damage to the stagger gauge, and finally, as with most of the abilities on this list, reduces the chance of the attack being interrupted. And finally, we have arrived at the extreme attack of Doctor Strange. This attack actually starts up very quickly and deals damage throughout the entire duration with a barrage of beam-style ethereal attacks that launch into a central area where the attack has been detonated that also resembles the Eye of Agamotto. Though this attack does start up fairly quickly, one thing that is highly important to note is Doctor Strange will start this attack exactly where he is. He does not adjust, does not rotate, does not move to get a wider sphere of influence. And though it does deal a lot of significant damage, that is the major drawback of this extreme attack, is it cannot be influenced or altered once the attack has been initiated. Apart from that, it is a solid option for high amounts of damage output once the attack has been used, especially when used in conjunction with other abilities and or extreme attacks within the cast. So having looked at everything that Doctor Strange brings to the table, where does he fit in our character tier list? Well, as much as I love Doctor Strange, and like I said at the beginning, he is my favorite character within the Marvel cast, he is not a super powerful character in this game. I wish he was better. Things that I would change about him is I'd like him to have more hits on his standard combo, just even with the base attacks that he does. And though his Bands of Sidorak and Winds of Watum offer some very specific adjustments to his character, which makes him unique within the cast, no doubt, it greatly pulls back from what he brings to the table on the damage output. So I do have to relegate Doctor Strange to C tier. However, I do firmly believe that Doctor Strange is a better character, all things considered collectively, than Black Widow is. So we will order Doctor Strange ahead of her in this tier, as we are ordering the tiers as well, in not just ranking characters within the tiers. But what do you think? Do you agree with my placement and assessment? Do you disagree? Do you feel like there's anything that I missed? Make sure to let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to leave a like again if you found today's video helpful and or enjoyable. With all that being said, thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you in the next one. Until then, take care and have a fantastic rest of your day.